the immortal words of L'Oreal, now for the science part. So if you're looking for where the future of growth is coming from, one of the best places to start investigating is the recent past. Because if you can pinpoint where growth has been happening during the most serious recession for a century, then you have some very good indicators of which parts of the economy, both geographically, sectorally, and in terms of company type, are best placed to actually lead the UK's growth through the next century. So, this is pretty much the conventional picture, and I would like to credit the Observer newspaper for this image, that essentially the UK economy is gravitationally centred on London. That remains the conventional wisdom, and as late as last December, members of Cabinet went on record complaining that the UK's economy was seriously imbalanced in favour of London and that this was hampering the development of the rest of the economy. So really the starting point for our investigation was to try and understand if that conventional view is actually correct or if it is a fiction. So from Companies House, we got hold of the records for all 2.4 million companies in the UK. We got their sector, the number of employees, their turnover, and their address. From the Ordnance Survey, we got the ward boundaries and the local authority boundaries for the whole of the UK. And then from the Office of National Statistics, we got the populations for every ward in the UK. And the reason that the ward factors so significantly in there is that most previous surveys have tended to be a bit broad brush, that they've looked at regions or they've looked at cities, they've looked at local authorities. And actually, we had a hunch that a lot of the interesting new patterns, you needed to look at a much more local level. So the ward is a very good unit to look at. There are actually 9,523 of them across the UK. So it's a very, very fine-grained research. And as far as I know, this is the first time that anyone has actually done an analysis at that level of detail. We actually processed something like 350 million pieces of data in the course of generating this report. So there are some gaps in the data which I want to flag up front. First of all, Scotland, no ward population data is available. For Northern Ireland, the ward boundary data, unlike the rest of the UK, is not freely available. And then through the period that we were looking at, which was 2009 to 2011, there had been a number of boundary changes of wards in the UK, and that meant that the data was unreliable for those areas. So we excluded those from the report. So that means out of the total 9,523 wards, we actually looked at 8,422 of them. So the first question we wanted to answer is, where is the growth happening? So if we go there. Now these red dots on the map are the places where total turnover of the businesses located in that ward increased by more than £50 million between 2009 and 2011. So against the picture where all UK businesses' turnover actually decreased by about £37 billion, these are the hotspots that were bucking the trend. And you can immediately see it completely gives the lie to the conventional picture, because those hotspots are not all in London. Indeed, almost 50% of the hotspots are outside of London, and in many cases far outside of London. They're not even located in other major cities. This is a fascinating finding, that actually there are hotspots of turnover growth at a very high level throughout pretty much the length and breadth of the UK. It includes places like Leeds, Spelthorne, Harrogate, Bradford. So the conclusion from that is, point one, the growth in the UK is not purely a London hegemony. It's happening across the country. So if we could go on to the next one, please. So the next question we wanted to answer is where entrepreneurship was strongest. That if we're identifying entrepreneurs, the people who create new businesses, as the drivers for the UK's future growth, then actually if we look at company formation rates, that's a pretty good way to see where the entrepreneurs are most active. So when we do that analysis, that's actually a lot closer to what you'd expect. You see the big red concentrations around London, around Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Hull, around the big centres of population. But therein lies the problem with that analysis, because surely it's not surprising that where there are the most people, you're going to get the most company formations. So we wanted to get a bit beyond that. So this is where the population statistics came into account. So what we did, at the level of every ward, we normalised the statistics by the size of the population in that ward. And here's the picture that we got. And as you can see, it's totally different. No longer are all of the red dots in the major cities. There are hotspots in rural areas, in suburban areas. And best of all, you can see that across the whole of the UK, you've got a lot of yellow and light green. So you have a very even spread of company formation and entrepreneurship across the UK. So I actually just put the two images side by side, so you can see quite how different they are. So next, we wanted to look at sectors and see which sectors were generating the most growth. So in a situation where if you lumped together all sectors other than technology and the creative industries, you see a decline in turnover over that period of £55.5 billion. Now, over the same period, technology and the creative industries, and for that we're using the Department of Culture, Media and Sports definition, you actually see an increase in turnover of almost £16 billion. So there's another indicator. Technology and the creative industries is a very significant driver of growth, even in the darkest time. So in terms of where the technology and creative industries are located, you can see they do conform pretty strongly to the major urban centres. London, Reading, Canterbury's lit up like a beacon there, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds. So that's another thing that this analysis reinforces, that actually the cities are the breeding ground for technology and the creative industries. So the final thing that we looked at was a very specific subset of businesses which the OECD defines as high growth. And those are businesses whose employee count increases by 20% or more for 2 successive years. And so we stripped out just those companies, and there are 10,039 of them in the UK as a whole. And then we looked at which local authorities had the most high growth companies in them. And out of all of the results that we got, I think this is the one that really surprised us the most, because there are authorities on that map that you would never have guessed. I grew up in Cornwall, so I couldn't be more thrilled to see the peninsula represented down there. But Bristol, Cardiff, Hackney, where I started the Trampery and where Trampoline Systems is based, so very happy to see that popping up as well. But again, reinforcing the idea that even for the highest growth businesses, this isn't just about London and the South East, this isn't even just about London and the other major cities. High growth businesses are being set up and developing around the whole of the UK. So just to understand how great the contribution made by high growth businesses is, if you look at them as a proportion of all companies, they're only 0.47%. But then if you analyse the turnover that they contribute, it's actually 8.4% of all company turnover in the UK. So that's about an 18 times disparity. So I think the final lesson from the picture is that if there are ways that we can support more high growth businesses and get more startups into scale-ups, then the benefit to the whole of the economy is incredibly disproportionate. And that is something that is very much worth us investing our time in. Okay, thank you very much.